Hey everybody, Jen Budd, former senior patrol agent with United States Border Patrol, former senior intelligence agent at San Diego Sector Headquarters. And this is going to be the second part in the series about the Border Patrol critical incident teams, the cover-up teams that I helped out and get disbanded. On the very first video I did about the critical incident teams, it was kind of a critical incident team 101. The different ways that the teams developed, what they actually are, the proof that I have found in years worth of research and so forth, and then just obviously my knowledge as an ex-agent of what they are. So if you haven't seen that one, I encourage you to go back and watch that. And at the end of that one, I had stated that I wanted to, for the first interview of a family who was victimized by this, I picked a family that's a United States family, and I picked a white family intentionally to show how these teams have denied justice and obstructed justice in the killings of American citizens and used the same system with which to get away with their crimes. Um, and the victim's name in that case was a man by the name of Stephen Keith. And his family, I've been working with his family for a couple of years, his sister. And I think, part of me thought that knowing that the critical incident teams had covered up the death of her brother and not even given him a legal investigation, a legal homicide investigation into his death. I think I naively thought that that would bring some comfort or a little bit of closure in knowing that they weren't crazy and thinking that this just doesn't make sense kind of thing. How did Stephen die? He just up and died, and I'll explain it in a minute. So, but what I found is at least with some of the victims' families, obviously, it's completely devastated them because in this case, Stephen's sister is a former cop, was a cop for a while. And she really believed in the system, kind of like I did when I joined the US Border Patrol. And then what she found out afterwards was that it was a cover up team. And she kind of knew this, but she couldn't prove it. And then when I came around a couple of years ago, she realized that it could be proven. And so we started looking at her case. And I think the emotional toll that it takes just going through a situation like that. And then on top of it, I think additionally believing probably in American exceptionalism and the idea that our police officers don't do this kind of stuff, which obviously is changing over the years. At least with, I can state that, Stephen's sister is white like I am. And so I'm talking mostly from that perspective, I would say. And I think for her, it's just made it even more devastating. And so I don't think I'm going to have families on unless they specifically ask to be on. Like the niece of Raymond Mattia, who was on the show. Her uncle was shot by Border Patrol, and the critical incident teams that are now uh, legalized as legal teams now have been rolled into CBP's Office of Professional Responsibility. So they're still responding, and they just did the same thing they've always done, just under a different badge and a different uniform. So, I mean, obviously, if families want to come on, then that's great, but I understand if they don't. So we're going to do the Stephen Keith story today. I am going to do the Stephen Keith story today. And it's a short story because we don't know that much about it. This happened it happened Christmas Eve, December 24th of 2013. And There were a couple articles about it in the media here locally. And I think there were a couple of articles internationally because Stephen, like I said, Stephen was a white man. It's interesting. The articles that came out about this, usually you see the Border Patrol their spokespeople will say, we're not going to talk about this case because it's an ongoing case and we don't want to influence it. But yet, a lot of times they do talk about the case. So, like in the Raymond Mattia case, the Tohono O'odham native that was shot last year and killed, they were saying, Border Patrol was saying, and CBP was saying, we don't want to come out and talk about this, because we don't want to influence the case. And I was like, But what they did do is they had Art Del Cueto, the vice president of their union, come out and then say, he was arrested a long time ago for this crime that he ended up, you know, serving his time or whatever it was. And it was a long time ago. And so they influenced the case like that. And in Stephen's case in 2013, so it would be 2014 since it happened at the very eve of Christmas Eve. So as the reports are coming out the last week of December 2013, and then into 2014, January, they were saying we don't want to talk about it that much and this and that, but they would mention to the press that I think he lived in Thailand or Indonesia, or he lived in an Asian country that's known for, shall we say, sexual tourism. And so they did put that out. They'll put out anything that they can find negative about the person they just killed. That's what they will do. And so that's what they did in Stephen's case. I don't know why Stephen chose to live in Asia, but there's a lot of reasons to go live in Asian countries other than just um, sexual tourism. So, and there's nothing that stated that that was why he did. And that has nothing to do with why he was killed, why he died in December of 2013 in a Border Patrol detention facility or a processing facility, a holding cell, basically. And so this actually happened at Campo Station, which was Mild Station. After I left, though, the original Campo Station was changed. It was moved up closer to the Interstate 8 checkpoint. So that means it's about 6 miles north of the border versus being about a mile north of the border, if that, maybe half mile north of the border back in the day when I was an agent. And they also had their area cut in half. They're mostly checkpoint agents. So it's an entirely different station. That does not mean that I'm saying that, agents at my own station couldn't have done this. I'm not saying that. But it is, obviously I personally look at that and it's just seeing how this happened and then knowing one of the supervisors involved, being trained by one of the supervisors when I was a young agent, Matt Grossett. He was a Legacy Border Patrol. He was the supervisor on duty that night. And so he would have been handling the coordination of getting the critical incident team out there to cover up whatever it is they needed to be covered up. And the only purpose to the critical incident teams being that they don't have the legal authority given to them by Congress to investigate use of force incidents or deaths in their custody or basically anything outside of immigration, customs, and narcotics enforcement. They really can't investigate. So they can't, if one of their agents rapes a migrant, they really can't investigate that. They're not supposed to be investigating that. They're supposed to be allowing local and federal jurisdictions to do that. The Border Patrol agents themselves do not have that ability. And then the problem when you get into CBP OPR that we have nowadays is the fact that the majority of their investigators are former Border Patrol agents, and that's done on purpose. That's been done. That's how we did it even before 9/11. Back in the day when our investigators were out of DOJ, they were all, the majority of them were ex-Border Patrol agents. And I have articles from the 90s and stuff that show that we in the Border Patrol have been filling the oversight agencies with our own, what we call bleed green agents, so that they find the way that we want them to find and look at the evidence the way the Border Patrol wants them to look at it. And it's why the boss of CBP's Office of Professional Responsibility Investigations is actually Daniel Altman, who is a former Border Patrol agent. So let that sink in. So essentially, on this night, Steve and Keith had some friends who lived in the Campo area, and Campo's a very rural area. But he had some friends who lived in the area, and late in the evening, I think it was, I want to say about 6 o'clock at night, he ended up in his car going back towards the city of San Diego. So he's going back westbound on Interstate 8, which means he had to go through the Interstate 8 checkpoint, which I helped set up when I was a junior agent. And initially, they stated they found 3 pounds of marijuana in his vehicle. The agent said when he pulled up to the checkpoint, he seemed a little suspicious and was acting a little weird and stuff. And so they handcuffed him and this and that. And when they searched his car, they found the 3 pounds of marijuana. And then they also said they found meth residue in the car. But there's never really been much of an investigation done on this. So from the Border Patrol's standpoint, this is what happened. They end up taking him from the checkpoint, which does have processing facilities, and they take him down to the actual station, which is 2 or 3 miles east of there now, on just off of Interstate 8. So he was moved from the Interstate 8 checkpoint at some point and taken to the Campo station, the new Campo station, Border Patrol station for processing. And at some point, let me look here. I don't believe it. It never said that they had a drug sniffing dog. And in 2013, weed was actually still illegal in California. But 3 pounds, I know that seems like a lot of weed, but honestly, it's not. I've seen them in the past, and I've seen U.S. attorneys say, we have so much drug smuggling going on, 3 pounds we consider personal use. I've even considered them to say like 100 pounds is personal use. And that's just because they're overwhelmed with the amount of cases they have to do. So they have to take the most egregious cases. So this is a little odd in that they're taking this case. It's a little odd that the Border Patrol will claim they're not racist and prejudiced, but the truth is that they are stopping. The majority of people are black and brown that they're stopping and not white. So that is unusual that he was a white man, especially since their first inquiry is supposed to be into his immigration status versus anything else. And I would say, like, generally, quite frankly, at that checkpoint, my experience is that when it's weed like that, 3 pounds of weed, it usually ends up in an agent's pocket and the person gets kicked on down the road. But Steve was not so lucky that night, unfortunately. So he ends up in custody in a cell at the Campo Border Patrol Station. And this is overnight, he ends up there. And then by the morning, he's dead. I mean, just like suddenly he died. So the explanation given by the Border Patrol that was that at around 11:20 at night on Christmas Eve, the agents there stated that Steve started showing signs of medical distress, and that's all they said. So it's important to note that Stephen's family stated that he had no known medical conditions at the time. The Border Patrol agent spokesman through San Diego sector was Paul Carr, Carr. He stated in an email to Al Jazeera at the time that the cause of death would be determined by the medical examiner's office, which is normal. And then he stated, and this is quoted, as per our statement, neutral third parties are conducting that investigation, and I cannot comment on what other people may or may not have said. So in the beginning, they stated that it was only, this Agent Carr stated it was only for illegal possession and intent to distribute approximately 3 pounds of marijuana. So at this point, nobody in the reports, at least in the media, is saying, oh, there's meth there. And then it states again that the San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office is investigating the circumstances around Mr. Keith's death. And let's see when they mention the meth. So it's not until the 28th, CBSnews.com, CBS8.com, where they finally say that he was arrested on suspicion of possession and intent to distribute about 3 pounds of marijuana, according to Supervisory Border Patrol Agent Paul Carr. That's the guy we mentioned in the last one. And now, for the first time, they mentioned drug paraphernalia and trace amounts of methamphetamine were found in the suspect's vehicle, though they never state where. So Keith was 58 at the time. They stated that they tried to do CPR and stuff, but they're still not stating why. They just say that, let's see, he became incoherent and unresponsive while in a holding cell at the Campo Border Patrol station later that evening. Emergency medical personnel began CPR and paramedics later took over, but he died shortly after midnight Wednesday. Okay. And then it says OIG, so the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Inspector General is looking into it, but I haven't seen no investigation by them. The sister, when she was called by a Border Patrol agent, she said, "What is he arrested for?" Because he's an American citizen. And she said that the answer was, "We are still determining that." And she said, "What do you mean? How do you not know what you arrested him for?" So I think that's interesting. So in the December 30th article, they state now that she was told by Border Patrol that he had a seizure and that agents saw what was happening on a monitor and ran in to help. But she said he has no history of seizures. And then she was told to call the supervisory Border Patrol agent, Pete Carr, who is the acting, at the time, the Border Patrol Public Information Officer. And she's on the phone with Border Patrol Agent Carr, Supervisory Border Patrol Agent Carr. And he says, "What's your brother's name?" And she said, "Are you kidding me? Like, how many people do you have die in your custody?" So Border Patrol said they were not going to release a statement until the investigation was complete. Yet they have been releasing information. They've been releasing information that he was found to have marijuana in there. They released information that, they'll say, "Oh, we're not going to release this information," but they release the information, enough information, so that the public and the press will think, "Well, this guy, he was a dirtbag. He probably deserved it." So now in March 14th, so now we're 3 months out, and the AP puts out a response from the medical examiner. And the medical examiner states that she found that when they say they don't want to talk about it. So March 14th, they're going to talk about it now. So now they say that he spent a significant amount of time in Asia. And so, the sentence actually reads, "Keith, a resident of Oakdale, California, who spent significant time in Asia, was, quote, fidgety and appeared both physically and mentally unstable during most of his time in custody, according to Supervisory Border Patrol Agent Matt Grossett." So you see, why would you say who spent a significant amount of time in Asia? That has nothing to do with the rest of the sentence. He goes on further to say he kicked his legs in his private cell and fell backward, apparently striking his head on a concrete bench. Wait a minute. So all this time, all we've been hearing is that he just suddenly fell over and died, and we don't know why. And it's only 3 months after, nearly 4 months after he died in their custody, that they finally admit, oh yeah, he actually, before he died, he fell in his cell and hit his head on a concrete bench. And yet the medical examiner says, oh, that had nothing to do with why he died. And they said after he strikes his head on a bench, an agent went and checked on him. And they noticed about after an hour and a half to 2 hours later that he was moving less. And so that's when they decided to get a paramedic, because they thought he was faking his injury. So even though he's fallen and hit in his head on a concrete bench, they still think he's faking his injury. And the paramedic decided that he was faking his injury. And here in this article of AP, they say the San Diego County Sheriff's Deputy Hector Fuentes told investigators that Keith was seen on camera having a seizure-like activity. The on-site paramedic concluded that Keith was faking the seizure after he hit his head. They're not even evaluating him, even though they know he hit his head, and they allow him to sit there for hours afterwards. But what's also important in this article is that this article is putting out to the press and to the public that it sounds like the San Diego County Sheriff's Deputy Hector Fuentes investigated this case, but he didn't. And I'm going to show you why. So none of this that I'm going to show you was ever known until I got the information on it. So at 1:40 a.m., the San Diego Sheriff's Deputy Fuentes, who's supposed to be investigating Keith's death because he has jurisdiction, and the Border Patrol critical incident teams are, just cover-up teams and nobody knows about them. And they don't have any authority, most certainly, to investigate something like this, a death in custody. At 1:40 a.m., Deputy Fuentes notifies the homicide sergeant, Sergeant Mesa, and his immediate supervisor, Sergeant Long, at the San Diego Sheriff's Office, that they will not be investigating the death of this United States citizen in Border Patrol custody, and that the Border Patrol Critical Incident Team member, Tracy Wong, would handle the investigation. So the sheriff's department is refusing to investigate a suspicious death that happened in custody within their jurisdiction. And it's not necessarily wrong that they did that, because if the FBI came in on this case and said, we're going to do this investigation, then that would be fine because they have the authority. But to sit there and say in the actual sheriff's investigation document, which I'm showing you, that they're just going to turn this case over to the critical incident team. That means that this man, this American citizen, and let's go even further, that this white man, who's an American citizen, never received an official, authorized, and legal investigation into his death in custody. The San Diego Sheriff's Deputy Fuentes, who has the authority to investigate and was the only one there who had the authority to investigate. In his report, he didn't document what time Steve arrived at the checkpoint or at Campo Station. He failed to document the times of the medical checks, any words said by Steve or any agents involved. He doesn't necessarily claim that he saw the videotapes, but he says, this is what was on the videotape. So can't necessarily be discerned if he watched the videotapes or if an agent told him what was on the videotapes. It's not known. And most notably, he failed to collect or even describe the videos that existed from the checkpoint and from Steve's cell where he ended up dying at the station. And, and the agents try and use that he had some previous medical distress, but then at the same time, they say it was faked and they don't provide him with any adequate care. And then suddenly he ends up dying. Now, the sister actually told me she talked to Tracy Wong, and you can see here by her notes, this is the day that Steve died. And she has the number and it says critical INC. And that means that they're going to be doing the investigation. An agent, and you can see Wong there. That's Tracy Wong. Border Patrol Critical Incident Team. The reason for Steve's death is listed as methamphetamine intoxication. According to the report, he had significant amounts of the drug in his blood and in his stomach, and that this is likely what killed him, though no baggie or balloon was found in his stomach or intestines. And it's important to also note that the autopsy report lists that the investigative agency assigned to the death of Mr. Stephen Keith was, quote, the U.S. Border Patrol through the critical incident team member, Border Patrol agent Tracy Wong. That's completely 100% illegal. Completely illegal. And I think it's important to also mention that the medical examiner pulls in what the Border Patrol agents are saying happened, even though it appears that she did not um, witness the videos that they claim they saw this odd behavior in. She writes in her report that his behavior was odd, and so odd that they witnessed him fall and hit his head on a concrete bench. You know, like I said, the agency paramedics and supervisors decided that didn't cause him any harm and that he didn't need to be examined by a doctor or other medical professional. And then that he became fidgety and they thought he was having a seizure, but then decided that he faked it. Um, and none of the trained personnel there even bothered to question that perhaps this is a typical reaction for methamphetamine toxicity, even though they knew he had meth residue in the car. So, I mean, like if you think he's having a seizure and you do some kind of test on him and you say, oh, he's not really having a seizure, then maybe you ought to think that maybe it's something else. But instead, they just thought he's faking it. But if you really did find meth residue, maybe you ought to say something like, did you eat meth? Did you put a bunch of meth in your stomach or something like that? And this apparently was never done. Um, the sister told me recently in a phone call that she had demanded to see the videos at the time, but that Border Patrol agent Tracy Wong spoke to her on the phone and told her that the videos were property of the United States Border Patrol and officially part of the investigation and would not be released because they were law enforcement sensitive. That is another word for we don't want you to see what really happened. That's bullshit that it's law enforcement sensitive. It's just a guy sitting in a cell. It's not going to show anything. So in the end, the family was never given any kind of investigation report. They have never seen an investigation report by the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Inspector General. They have never seen an investigative report from the San Diego Sheriff's Office until recently when we just got this one that we finally got, which admits that they did not bother to do an investigation and allowed the critical incident teams to do it. CBP does not appear or anybody else's reports. She has not received a report from CBP. She has never received a report from the Border Patrol Critical Incident Team, which apparently did her brother's investigation into his death. She has never seen that report. It took the family 13 years just to get the San Diego Sheriff's Office report that stated they didn't do the investigation. So if nothing's wrong with the Border Patrol critical incident teams doing reports like this, then why hasn't the family received the report if they're not doing anything wrong? Isn't the family entitled to know what happened to their loved one? I mean, to date, it's been over a decade, and the family has no idea why he died. And he's never received a proper investigation. So that's the story of Stephen Keith and how he died in Border Patrol custody and how the Border Patrol did not give this man his due justice. And I'm going to do a very in-depth video right after this one about the Border Patrol critical incident teams and the one federal agency who recently just investigated the teams. That's called the GAO, or the Government Accountability Office. They claim to be a nonpartisan group. They're not really a nonpartisan group, like most of these things. And it was the most pathetic investigation to the cover-up teams. It was in response to the Southern Border Community Coalition's complaint that I helped work on about these teams. It took my research and then did the complaint and got them disbanded, but then unfortunately moved to CBP's Office of Professional Responsibility. And I wasn't able to respond to it right away just because I've been doing a lot of speaking events and stuff. But I do want to talk about that and why that report is a joke. And so I think I'm gonna I'll be stopping this recording and then do another one. So if you want more information on the critical incident teams, you can go to my blog page under, I think it's USBP Critical Incident Teams. And there's about 10 different articles in there. So I don't always have time to do videos and I select which ones to do and stuff. But if you think that this just involves migrants who are coming across illegally and already breaking the law, and you have this attitude of, oh, they just deserve this. Well, this man was an American man, and he's not the only one. And if you're an agent and you think it's okay, and what I'm doing in exposing these teams is a horrible thing, and how unloyal and anti-American and unpatriotic I am, I will tell you this as a former Border Patrol agent. There are times when you do have to use force. And I would say that I have used force illegally and justifiably as an agent. And I have also at times used it illegally and I could not justify it. And that happens to pretty much most Border Patrol agents, at least if you're working in the fields and stuff, in the field on the border. And if I was an agent and I was involved in a use of force incident, whether I'm pepper spraying somebody or beating somebody or shooting somebody and I kill them, or I throw a spike strip, and because that's a use of force too, and somebody ends up dying, I would want to know that the people investigating this are professionals, that they will give me as an agent a fair shot. And what these critical incident teams has done is every time a Border Patrol agent gets into it with somebody, even if it is a situation where they are truly justified, people don't believe them. And the reason why people believe that the Border Patrol is so corrupt and that they're covering up crimes is because they are. So if you want to be all about honor first, and you want to actually stick by this idea that Border Patrol agents are honorable and they're not doing anything wrong, you should want these critical incident teams removed as well, because they don't get to the truth. They don't protect you as agents, because I have seen the critical incident teams used against agents many times. If you're thinking that what I'm doing and exposing these teams is unpatriotic and immoral and this and that, I want you to think about that. Because as an agent, if I get into a hairy situation and I have to use force, I want to know that my union's there to back me and not backing some critical incident team in the Border Patrol that does not have the authority to do what they're doing. It doesn't help me in court if you send an illegal and corrupt evidence cover-up team in to deal with the incident that I was involved in, if I truly believe that I'm justified in using force. I hope to bring more and more of these cases to you. I hope that we truly start to understand what this is. And my goal ultimately is just to have the truth told about this. I honestly don't expect there to be any kind of accountability aside from the fact that we admit that they happened and we make the records public. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about the study and the investigation that the Government Accountability Office did. And that will freaking blow your mind. And it's the reason why these teams continue to act the way they do. It's why Border Patrol agents continue to act with impunity, is because there is never accountability. And I'm sorry, even as a former Border Patrol agent who did at one time really, really love that job, was very proud to be an agent. At one point, 100 years worth of that agency, and not a single agent has ever been convicted of a use of force, of killing a migrant in 100 years in a court of law. Come on. That's just ridiculous. That's ridiculous for the hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of people Border Patrol agents have killed. I mean, it's ridiculous, especially when you look at all the people killed and they were shot in the back. So I'm going to keep going with this. But that is the Stephen Keith story. That is how Stephen Keith, originally of California, grew up over here, apparently likes visiting Asian countries. That's how he died in Border Patrol custody. And that's how the Border Patrol Critical Incident Team denied him a legal homicide investigation as a United States citizen.